Well, I am delighted to be sharing this church leader tool called Your Best Easter Ever. We're going to talk about some Easter planning to make Easter excellent this year. And let me highlight, there's also a PDF document that's in the notes that you can print. You could use that as a checklist for the things we're talking about and even jot some notes as I'm teaching on that. So you might want to print that out and then continue on. So your best Easter ever. Let's first talk about some beginning ideas. The first of which is it's going to take some effort. There's some work that's going to need to go into planning and having your best Easter ever, but you're going to find that more than worth it in the end of the results. And really, when I talk about your best Easter, we're talking about tapping into the power of Easter. We all know Easter is the center, the truth of the gospel is the Easter message. And all we're doing is just building on that excitement and that power that God displayed, that love that God displayed in Easter. We're just building on that and making some extra effort that God will turn around and bless even more so. You know, I was thinking about this recently in terms of lag and lead. I heard Peggy Hahn, who runs the LEAD organization. It's waytolead.org. She was talking about different kinds of metrics, and she said so often we have lag metrics, which is just tells us the results of what has already happened. In terms of Easter, your Easter attendance, by the time you count your Easter attendance, it's already over. What we want is to think about some lead metrics. What can we do? What can we measure going into Easter to make it our best Easter ever? And we'll talk about this at the end. But we're gonna work on some things that will be lead metrics, not lag metrics. And then one more thought. What we're building on here is the idea of big day. I love how Nelson Searcy, a great teacher, talks about a big day, putting some extra effort and some extra work into making a particular service, like Easter, a big day. What we're really talking about here is the big day concept. This is something that a wonderful pastor and teacher, Nelson Searcy, talks about pouring some extra effort into some special days throughout the year to get exceptional results. We're making sure that Easter is the big day. And then last, before I dive into some more specifics, make sure that you cover your Easter preparation in prayer. In personal prayer, your leaders that are part of this process, ask them to be in prayer. If you have a prayer chain or a prayer team, ask them to be in prayer. You could even make up a simple prayer chart that you share with those leaders and prayer team members to make sure that you're covering your Easter preparation in prayer. So let's dive into some thoughts on preparation. And the first piece is gather a team. That would be different in each context. In some teams, that might be your staff. In other teams, it might be your church council. For other churches, it might be your evangelism team. Gather those people together and begin to have some conversation about all the things that happen. I'm a big believer that all of us are smarter than any of us individually. So start with your team and discuss with your team or think personally about your Easter theme. Exactly what direction do you want to go in Easter? And then as you work toward advertising and outreach, you'll have that general theme in mind. We all know that there's a number of different directions that you can focus on in Easter. Begin to give that some thought, and that will really help your planning. And then speaking of Easter planning, it's a great time to start thinking about extra music, to already be thinking about a message, maybe something special you want to do to just make Easter a little bit extra. Don't make it super over the top. If you go way overboard, and then someone is excited about attending your church on Easter, but then come back the next week and you don't have the mini orchestra or whatever it was that you did that was over the top, they might be a little disappointed. You want to be extra special, but not super over the top, that it doesn't exceed what people would normally find in the life of your congregation. But you might also throw something extra in that would be special for Easter. I heard the great example, this was by Nelson Searcy, of how they do a family portrait on Easter. They get a photographer taking digital pictures. Everybody's all dressed up and looking special on Easter. And that's just something special they do on Easter morning that is a little bit of a blessing. And then they email off the family portrait to folks. So maybe there's something special you want to do like that. Or we'll talk later about something special for the kids, or some special fellowship might be appropriate. And speaking of kids, make sure that you're doing your planning for your children's ministry, your Sunday school, your Christian education ahead of time as well. And as you're thinking about a theme, you can pass that on. So maybe the kids can be connected with that theme. Or I know a number of Christian education programs will have a gift or a grab bag, something special for kids who are there on Easter morning as well. And last, make sure that you begin to publicize the date. Church leaders know that they can look up Easter online, or they look for the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox, but normal folks don't keep track of when Easter is. So begin to publicize that date so people know when Easter is. Okay, so let's dive into some specific ways that we can do extra outreach for Easter. First, don't be afraid to invest some extra finances. In fact, I know of one church that 50% of their outreach budget they spend on Easter, because Easter is that important. It's such a powerful day. They want to make sure that if they reach somebody in their community and bring them in, the date they want them there is for Easter. So also, think about communicating in multiple methods. Just a quick story here. In my last congregation, I would often find that we would forget to communicate in a specific way. So I sat one day with our staff and we brainstormed all the ways that we were communicating. Well, the list had like 15 different methods, and I realized that's why we were forgetting some of those methods. They were just too many to keep in our heads. So we made the list, printed it, gave it out to everybody. As a help to you, I included in the description notes the different methods that we use for communication, and that might be helpful for you. I'm sure you don't use all the same methods, but it might help you to start generating your list of how you can communicate for your best Easter ever. And then make sure that you resource the people in your congregation. I've heard statistics of upwards of 65% of people in the United States are willing to accept an invitation from a friend, a coworker, a family member to come to church. And what we want to do is resource the people in our congregation to go ahead and make those invitations. You can create print resources. Why not a standard invitation to Easter? That would be very effective. You could also print up business cards. They're very cost effective. Give them out to your members and say, put a stack in your pocket and hand them out to people and invite them to come to Easter. Also, postcards that people can hand out to a friend, a coworker, a neighbor, a family member are very, very helpful. Or even cheaper, print some half-page flyers, put some extras in your bulletin, and encourage people to hand them out to others. And of course, as well as print resources, a great idea is to resource people with social media. You can post things on Facebook and Instagram and other places that folks can then forward on to others. Or I came across a great idea by another wonderful church leader by the name of Bob Franquiz. He's down in southern Florida. Bob prints on the back of his bulletin an image and then encourages people to take a picture with their smartphone of that image, that invitation, and then he even tells them here and add some text, gives them an example, and it makes it so easy for someone to take their smartphone, take a picture, add a little bit of text of invitation, and then send that off to everybody in their social media contacts. So make sure you're using social media. I love YouTube, by the way. We often create YouTube videos. They're completely free, and then people can, again, share them with others to invite them for Easter. So as you're creating some of those resources, make sure that you have your address on it, have your website, communicate your worship times, and then make sure as well that you're thinking like an unchurched person, or at least a person who might not ordinarily be in church on Easter. Don't use any churchy language, any inside language. Help them to see the benefit of why they would want to come and celebrate and worship on Easter. You could also provide training for folks. It would only take a few minutes in worship to train folks how they could give an invitation or use a social media invitation. Or one of the things I love to do is to have a testimony of someone who visited my church for the first time on Easter as a form of encouragement to say to others, you could invite someone, and their first time and their ongoing time to connect with our church could be on Easter morning. Also, advertising is worth spending some money on in the local newspaper, in outside banners, in whatever form of advertising you have found to be helpful. Again, I have been blessed by the thought by Bob Frankwis, who shared one time that there's only two types of people in your community: the people who someone in your church knows who could invite, and the people that no one in your church knows, that the only way you're going to get to invite them is through advertising. It also provides sort of an air cover for the invitations that are given by members of your church. So that's worth investing in. And you might also encourage your members to have a little bit of accountability and prayer, in that ask them to write down who they plan to invite, and then give that to your prayer team and ask them to pray over the names of those your congregation are planning to invite. Just a little bit of thought, by the way, for those who are preparing to preach. Give it some thought, and you already have in thinking about an Easter theme, but if you start planning now, church leaders all know that Holy Week gets really, really busy, and if you're starting to think about your Easter message now, God has some time to work and to just kind of formulate that in your mind. So begin to give it some early thought. Think about it as an invitational message, maybe even a wooing message. There will be people who haven't been in church in a long time, and to give them some things to think on, some teasers, some things that may kind of draw them. I love the image that I read by a pastor by the name of Jason Bradley, that's spelled Jayson. He said, think about it as somebody who's stopped dating for a while because of maybe a bad relationship. How would you woo this person back to a faith community in your Easter message? Also, sometimes it's helpful to think about the tightrope that you want to walk between being faithful to the gospel, being faithful to the message that is Easter, that Jesus Christ died and rose again for us, but also not so pushy or so over the top that it'll push people away. I was surprised this past year, just personally, how my Christmas Eve message was a little bit lower tone than I normally give. And yet people said that it was one of my best messages ever. I think I was walking that tightrope between being faithful to the message and not bowling people over. And then last, give some easy steps where people can, from the message, take a logical next step of growing in faith. That could apply to your members, and it could also apply to someone who's a guest. Give them an easy next step. So let me talk for a minute as well about being ready. So we've done some extra effort to make this our best Easter ever. Let's be ready for guests. And I definitely want to highlight that there's a church leader tool on the welcome system that you might want to check out. In the show notes, I will give you a link to that so you could go and listen to that lesson about having an exceptional welcome system. But you want to make sure, at the very minimum, that you have a good connection card communication card, whatever you call it in your setting, that's in your bulletin, that's easy for people to fill out to get their information so that then you can follow up. As well, some simple things like greeters, a couple of good handshakes as people come in, walking your building ahead of time to make sure it's visitor friendly. These are all basic things, and there's many more listed in that particular church leader tool on a good welcome system. It's also a great morning to update your database. That works for your members and for guests to encourage people, hey, fill out the information because we want to make sure that we have all the up-to-date information so we can be in communication with you. It's also a great time to have a little bit of extra food and fellowship after worship, giving chance for people to feel welcome and to get invited. So you might want to put a little extra effort in that way. It's also a great morning to encourage any small groups that are coming up. I particularly want to highlight that one of the worst things to do with your Easter message is to make it the end of a series, if you're a series preacher, because it'll make a new guest feel like, well, I kind of came in at the tail end of this. A great way to preach on Easter is to make it the beginning of a series. Hopefully, you're going to catch some people who might want to come back the next week and the following weeks, or you could start a brand new series the week after Easter and then make sure you advertise that on Easter about some of the great new things that are coming. Or maybe there's other next steps. If you have a concert or something special coming up in the life of your church, if you have a reception for people who are interested in the church or new members classes coming up, make sure that you highlight them on Easter. Another way to give folks that next step. And then lastly, let's just talk about a little bit of wrap up. So celebrate whatever happens on Easter. Celebrate that. Celebrate the fact that you put some extra effort and hopefully had a better Easter than ever. And I talked at the beginning about metrics. Yes, hopefully it is your best Easter ever, but also measure how many invitations you gave out, how many social media contacts you gave out, the things that you did to get to a great Easter. That's your lead metrics. Celebrate them. Make sure that you thank people who are on your team, folks who did invite someone. If you know someone who invited someone on Easter, make sure you thank them. Celebrate what happens on Easter, and also spend some time evaluating. You can have some conversation with whoever your planning team was to see if we learn some things to make your next Easter your best Easter ever. So I hope that this has been a blessing. I hope your Easter is excellent, and I hope that you'll forward this on to somebody else and make it their best Easter as well. Pass it on to another church leader. Take care and God bless.